Thank you very much, Joseph, for that elaboration of the purpose of the research. And perhaps based on what you've told us, what constitutes green decent jobs and what you found out in the research, maybe you may want to take us through some of the highlights of the findings and what came out quite strongly from your fieldwork and from visiting different countries, speaking to different people, assessing different industries. So what are some of the things that you would like us to focus on in terms of the findings?
Thank you, Fred. So when we're looking at the recycling industry, obviously, for a lot of people, there will be a lot of questions that they have about recycling, and especially in Africa, where we see a lot of it being done informally, there might be questions and certain attitudes that we wanted to test in doing our research. And the first thing we wanted to find out is what is the attitude of African youth, to African green jobs. Now, an interesting survey was done by the Africa Youth Survey in 2022, and it showed that the environment is a key area of concern to African youth. 75% of African youth say they are concerned about climate change and are taking it upon themselves to live more sustainably, and they want the same commitment to the environment from their leaders. Now, the African youth expect the impact of climate change to be dire and want to make addressing climate change a priority in their nations. Interestingly, 5 out of every 6 young people think that their government needs to do more to address climate change. I was blown away by the awareness, especially on pollution and the impact it was having on agriculture and biodiversity and natural ecosystems. So in terms of attitude, I guess that was the biggest surprise, that we found the African youth are very much aware of the impact of climate change and the impact of environmental degradation and pollution on their future. And they want more to be done, to safeguard the future of the world by minimizing the impacts of climate change and the causes of climate change. So in looking at recycling specifically, there already has been preliminary research which has been done on waste recycling, and it shows that Africa generates upwards of 250 million tons of municipal solid waste. 250 million. And an estimated 70 to 80% is recyclable, but only 4% is actually being currently recycled. The rest of the waste is being put in landfills, in informal dumps. It's being dumped in agricultural space, in the oceans, in the rivers, and that's not sustainable. That's actually choking the continent. We then looked at the kind of work which is being done in recycling across Africa, and we noticed that most of the recyclers are what you call small, micro, and medium-scale enterprises. And it made us realize that in promoting recycling, the SMME sector, the small, micro, and medium enterprise sector, is going to be a key sector. And how do we define these micro, small, and medium enterprises? These are enterprises that have total assets of up to 10,000 and have annual sales of up to 100,000 a year. They employ at the maximum, the small enterprises, they would employ a maximum of 50 people. And, the small, rather than the micro, would have turnover of, say, 3 million. So most of the recycling companies that we studied in case studies fell either under the micro or small enterprise. And so that's a very key sector. There's a couple of companies or projects that we looked at in recycling There's a company called Recyclers in Nigeria. There's a company called Reswaye in Nigeria as well. EcoBricks in Uganda, which is one I'm going to focus on because we found that they had very well developed systems. So those are some of the recycling case studies that we looked at. So zeroing in on one case study, which was the EcoBricks that's located in Masaka in Uganda. It's a company which was established in 2015 through the founder injecting, $15,000 to start off the project. They do plastic waste recycling, and they process the plastic into products such as jewelry, flower pots, fencing posts, pavers, and other industrial products. They employ 25 factory staff, and 5 of those are highly skilled in engineering and in finance, in those kind of skilled sectors. However, the important figure for us was the employment in the wider value chain. So EcoBricks works with a network of 2,500 waste pickers that they call resource recovery persons, who they provide with workwear such as uniforms, overalls, and other protective equipment. Now they buy the plastic from these waste pickers or resource recovery persons at between 25 cents to 50 US cents per kg, which is very, very generous. It's one of the highest rates we came across in Africa, depending, of course, on the types of plastics, because there are different types of plastics. There are plastic bottles, there are hard plastics, and they attract a different price. The organization works in partnership with a local church. There's a great partnership. The church donated the land on which the operations are based, and the church, promoted the recycling in that community using their platforms within the community. Now, EcoBricks has worked on facilitating the creation of a waste pickers association that represents the interests of the waste pickers. And it's called the Uganda Resource Recovery Association, which currently has about 500 members. And 70% of the people they work with are women. So there's a strong element of women empowerment in the program. The organization works with disabled people as well. And the important thing is they are helping people who would be unemployed, have no source of income, to earn a living wage.
It's interesting because, in my context, in South Africa, waste picking is often seen as something that's a job without dignity, or a job that's done by people who are homeless. In your research, were you able to find examples of people who were able to, as you were saying earlier, find a job with dignity, a job that is sustainable? What were you able to find in the research? Are there some good examples of that?
Yes. So there's a young man called Eraya, 27 years old, that we interviewed. And he spoke about how he's been able to gain key skills, be able to earn a very decent wage, and be able to improve not just his life, but the life of the family, because most of these people come from desperately poor communities where they would otherwise be, earning nothing per day or even per month. And so the young people that are involved in this program identify it as a program that's helped them with skills, with actual technical skills, business skills, but also with the social skills, the soft skills that you need in order to be able to succeed in life. And these are some of the skills that they're earning from participating in this program. And certainly the incomes were making quite a huge difference. Maybe let me just give you an example then of a lady who heads the Uganda Resource Recovery Association, WURA, and her name is Josephine, but they've given her a nickname. They call her Nabachupa, which means the plastic woman. And she's earned that nickname because she's a champion in the community of Masaka for recycling. Now, she's got an interesting story. This woman was a teacher in a local school for 7 years. But she had a keen interest in promoting recycling. She was approached by the local priest, who recognized their potential and said, would you be interested in working, with Ecobricks in promoting recycling in Masaka? So she started doing that while she was teaching. But then eventually she moved on from, that teaching role and became the head of the Uganda Recycling Waste, Recovery Association. And that's an unusual thing. You would expect somebody to come from such a job, white collar job, not to be keen to move into waste, dealing with rubbish on a daily basis. But she was able to do that, not just because of the inspiration, because she understood the impact that this would have on the community, and how much it was empowering, especially the urban poor, and how much it was empowering the women in the community. But also, don't forget, they do earn a reasonable income from the recycling. So to me, that was one great big surprise that came from this research, that actually recycling is a decent job.
Yeah, maybe apart from the examples that you've given around how economically empowering, these two industries are, recycling and sustainable construction. Perhaps it might be interesting to hear from you what other key drivers of these jobs were. I've had quite interesting testimonies and stories from your presentation today. What would you consider are the key drivers or other key determinants of these, jobs?
Thank you, Fred. So it emerged that there is a great need for partnerships to be established. So for instance, with the church played a key role in donating land. The church played a key role in, promoting the recycling in the area of Masaka. We recognize as well that the approach that Ecobricks has taken of helping people involved in recycling to get into a union or an association that, promotes their interests, that helps with training, that helps with, helping that industry to be organized and probably in a way formalized. That was one of the key elements of success. Training is something that should never be left out when doing this. The people that are working with Ecobricks benefit from training. They benefit from environmental training, from financial skills, and other trainings that are provided to them that really empower the community. So all these things added together create a successful recycling enterprise, that ticks those 6 aspects we were looking at in terms of a decent job, or a green job, and what would be a good job in the recycling sector and in the sustainable construction sector. I shall mention policy as well, because you need to have enabling policies that allow the sector to grow and to flourish. So that's another key element that I'm going to throw in there.
You've spoken a bit about the role of the church, which I think is really exciting, because as an organization who works with churches around the continent, we really see the church as being the kind of the heart of organizing a movement for change. And so it's really exciting to hear you talk about the role of the church. I mean, do you see any ways that the church might be able to grow into this space? You've already mentioned some of the ways that the church is already in this space, but is there a larger role for the church going forward?
The church is probably one of the most influential vehicles for change in Africa. The church has got access to communities, is in a trusted space. And so the church is a great tool for behavioral change through information campaigns, through publicizing these initiatives, through teaching, the local communities, the importance of recycling, the importance of, proper waste management, the importance of preserving the environment from pollution and degradation. Those are things that the church can do very, very effectively. But like we've seen with the EcoBricks in Masaka, the church also has access to certain resources like land. Could the church create recycling stations, for example, where people can bring bottles and put them in those recycling stations? Could the church, promote, with its young people, the youth programs, the Sunday school programs, could it promote this culture and this mentality of recycling and waste management? So these are all opportunities that are, available for the church. Could the church stimulate the creation of social enterprises where young people, group together and set up recycling, businesses in their communities? These are all opportunities that the church could exploit.
Very important, the role of the church in sort of partnering with these industries, but also helping them in different aspects, like growing the culture of recycling, but also offering some incentives like land, which the church holds. I mean, that for me is a huge takeaway from this research. But I wanted to get from you what would be other forms of key takeaways that you found from this piece of research.
So we think that there are three key takeaways that I could put forward. The first one I've touched on the behavioral change campaign. I think it's important to launch an Africa-wide behavioral change campaign to influence society around recycling. Doing things like establishing youth platforms that promote recycling, and recycling schemes, making recycling receptacles available, whether it's bins, it's recycling stations, et cetera, that will, enable communities to recycle. So there has to be a campaign across Africa to promote recycling. And that's going to have a huge element of behavioral change. So people stop dumping waste, stop tipping waste in rivers and chucking it into the ocean, and they start managing waste in a sustainable way, which is through recycling. The second thing we would want to promote or pick up on as a takeaway is utilizing successful pilots like EcoBricks. Is a successful pilot that ticks pretty much all the boxes for decent jobs and sustainability, social, economic, and environmental. How can we take this and create models and modules for replication that will enable youths from across Africa to come and have hands-on learning? Those youths that want to start their own operations are given some kind of like apprenticeship training in these pilot facilities, where they're given the skills, they can have hands-on, training, and where recycling becomes prioritized in the work that we do across Africa and in publicizing work with the young people, especially in Africa. And then the third element is on policy. It's going to be important for us to get the support of African governments to make recycling a priority. And that could include creating budgets, at a local level for recycling initiatives, getting government support for these, publicity and awareness and behavioral change campaigns, and maybe even getting in policies and legislation that promote the recycling. So to me, those would be the three key takeaways from recycling and sustainable construction, because without these elements coming in, just 4%, as we said in the beginning, of the waste is being recycled, when really 80% of the waste, 70 to 80% of the waste in Africa can be recycled in one form or another. So that requires, collaboration at all these levels.
Thank you so much. That's been a really interesting conversation. And for those of you who are listening, we're going to have an opportunity to connect and really engage with this in much more detail as a community. So this was a great opportunity to listen and to learn, but we want to hear your voices as we start to dissect this information, dissect the recommendations that we've heard, and then take it forward into action. There's no point in doing this great research unless we can start to pilot some new projects and ultimately create new jobs for those young people and perhaps for you as we go forward.